Out of the four major sports in North America, which includes the NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB, none has changed more than the National Basketball Association over the last 10 years. As a diehard sports fan, I can say without hesitation that the NBA has evolved so much over the past decade that it's become almost unrecognizable. I mean, when I turn on highlights from back in 2013, for example, I often find myself saying things like, "What kind of play is this? What kind of play is that? Can't this dude shoot a three? What the heck is going on?" I know 10 years wasn't too long ago, but things look almost, dare I say, archaic? Being an avid NBA fan, it's hard to notice these changes on a year-to-year basis, but when I look back at it now, it's as clear as night and day. Ladies and gentlemen, join me today in a journey through time as we go over just how much the NBA has actually changed over the last 10 years. Money, money, money. We all love money, and this is probably the one major change that NBA players love the most. You see, more than any of the other major sports in North America, the NBA has experienced the most increases in overall revenue over the past decade. And in this department, the race isn't even close. This is the result of various factors, including bigger television contracts and a global expansion of the sport's popularity. For a quick example of what I mean by global, remember when STEPH did his night-night celebration? Well, that stormed around the world in just the blink of an eye. Anyway, to illustrate how significant this increase in revenue is, I'll make a quick comparison to the NHL, the National Hockey League. So, back in 2013, there was a lockout in the NHL and thus salaries were reduced. So instead, I'll use the 2012 numbers for a more complete picture. And back in 2012, the highest paid NHL player was Brad Richards for $12 million. Well, this year in 2023, the highest paid NHL player was Tyler Seguin for $13 million. Now, don't get me wrong, $13 million is a ton of money, but evidently, their salaries didn't increase by much, and probably didn't even keep up with inflation. Now let's turn towards basketball. During the 2013 NBA season, the highest paid player was Kobe Bryant at $30 million. Now, that's a lot of money, and honestly speaking, that's probably enough to retire my family for a complete generation or two. But looking at the 2023 NBA salaries, $30 million is actually a ripoff for a superstar. In fact, some superstars would probably get offended if they were only offered $30 million because the max someone could make now is a whopping $48 million, which happens to be Steph Curry. That's over a 50% increase from 10 years ago. Sheesh, guys. To illustrate even further how much this has changed, let's look at a player today that's making just as much as Kobe made back in 2013. So looking at this list here from ESPN, Gordon Hayward, who was 5th in scoring for the Charlotte Hornets this past season with just 14.7 points per game, made about $30 million for 2023, which is about the same amount Kobe made in 2013. Yeah, you heard that right. A role player for the Hornets made the same amount as Kobe did when he was still making all NBA first teams. Ain't that insane, guys? To put things into even more perspective, in 2013, LeBron James won his 4th MVP and his 2nd championship. That year, he was paid $19 million. Well, this year in 2023, there were 67 players getting paid more than LeBron did when he was in his prime. I mean, players like Eric Bledsoe, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Bojan Bogdanovic are all making more than LeBron did when he was doing iconic dunks like these with D. Wade. Then to add even more smoke to this fire, next season in 2024, Dylan Dynasty Brooks will be making more money than LeBron did when he won back-to-back MVPs. Sheesh, guys. Talk about a massive change. But if you thought that was a big change, wait until you see this next one. So, back in 2013, the 3-point revolution hadn't yet burst onto the NBA basketball world. Steph Curry was at the time just starting to show the NBA what was possible, but the league didn't quite yet believe it would work on the biggest stages. So consequently, there was still a lot of old school basketball going on. Like, for example, let's take a look at the average number of three-point attempts per team. Back in 2013, on average, a team shot 23-point attempts per game. In today's NBA, teams like the Golden State Warriors or the Boston Celtics would shoot north of 40 trays a game, which means that, on average, they'll attempt more than 23-point attempts in a single half. In 2023, the overall average around the league attempted 34.2 triples per game, which means that teams these days are shooting upwards of 70% more threes per game than they were 10 years ago. That's a complete game changer. But wait, I've got more. Check this out. So, for specifically the center position in the NBA, I went in to take a look to see how many centers shot a respectable 35% or better from three-point range in 2013, and compared it with today's NBA, and the answer is surprising. As per the numbers which I pulled directly off NBA.com, back in 2013, there were only 4 centers who shot over 35% from three-point range that season. Dirk was classified as a power forward for some reason, but even if we added him to this list, there'd be 5 centers in the entire league who shot a respectable percentage from long distance. In today's NBA, however, that number is 38, or could be 40 if you round these 2 players up from 34.9. That's 8 times the number of big men who can shoot. 8 times. What used to be a rare type of player in the league has now become the norm. And to add further onto this, there have been many centers like the Manimal and Roy Hibbert who are now out of a job because of their inability to hit perimeter shots. The three-point revolution completely changed the NBA over the past decade, and another area that it affected was the pacing of the game. You see, back in 2013, the average team only had about 92 possessions per 48-minute game, but as of today, that number has bumped up to over 99, which shows how much the game has really sped up. I do have to note, however, that one other factor that picked up the pace of games was an actual rule change. Prior to the offseason of 2018, a change was made in the NBA where after offensive rebounds, the shot clock was reset to 14 instead of 24 where it used to be. But moving on here. Back a decade ago in 2013, the NBA was all about small forwards. One could say that it was the small forward era, where wing players were what most teams sought after and what most teams were building around. I mean, looking at the MVP voting that year, it was LeBron at number 1, Durant at number 2, and Carmelo at number 3. The number 1 pick in the draft also happened to be a small forward. In 2023, however, the times have changed, and what used to be the era of the small forwards has now become the era of the unicorns. A clear example of this is the fact that, for the past few years, the MVP was more or less a 3-man race between Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis. 7-foot giants who each pose a unique set of problems that the NBA hasn't really seen since the days of Wilt Chamberlain. The MVP award has literally been passing through these 3 like a hot potato. Then, looking at the recent drafts, it seems to be trending this way as well, with players like Paolo Banchero, Chet Holmgren, and now Victor Wembanyama ushering into the NBA. Tall giants who all have handles, who can all shoot the 3-ball, and who all have guard skills. But moving on here, I want to go over some actual changes that we can see with our own 2 eyes on the basketball courts. Back just 10 years ago, as y'all can see, most pick and rolls were done within the arc. Like, both the screener and the defenders were usually well within the arc, and this was because players weren't really known to pull up off the dribble from beyond the arc just yet. Well, after the Steph Curry explosion, every guard in the world started practicing these types of shots, and as you can see, in today's NBA, both the defender and the screener are usually both past the 3-point line now. This is why people say that Steph Curry changed the geometry of the game. And it doesn't just apply to pick and rolls either. Another example of this in play are centers and where they're positioned on the floor. Back in 2013, pretty much all centers not named Dirk Nowitzki were manning the paint both on offense and defense. They were there to dunk the ball and grab boards, nothing more, nothing less. Now, don't get me wrong, Centers still do that, and that's still a huge part of their game. But now, in addition to all the stuff they do in the paint, you'll see them sometimes running out to the perimeter for a catch-and-shoot three, or running for a transition three when the game is on the line. Like, this is something that in 2013 was completely unheard of. If a center did that a decade ago, he'd get yelled at by his coach, get benched, and would probably be on Shacked and a Fool. What's scary about all this is the NBA is still in a transitioning phase. Basketball is becoming more and more of a global sport, as evident from the last 5 MVPs having gone to international players. Unicorns are sprouting out every year now, and this trend seems to be only getting bigger. How much more will the NBA change over the next 10 years? Will players start doing pick and rolls from the half-court line? Probably not. But changes will come, and I certainly look forward to them.